Welcome to the I Need More Coffee and Better Ideas podcast, where we caffeinate your brain with the freshest takes in news media.
And there's been a lot of progress from all of the actors, essentially, but OpenAI, Gemini, etc. But now, where the value really becomes apparent is you asking a question, sending in data, and you get structured data back.
Many media houses and publishers are underestimating the gold they actually sit on with data, the first-party data.
And welcome to this week's episode of I Need More Coffee and Better Ideas podcast. Today, we're recording a Christmas special in DN Media Group's podcast studio. With me today, I have our CEO, Eirik, who's been on the show before.
Hello.
Hello. And I've got Fredrik Nøring, who is our co-founder and head of innovation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
The plan today is to perhaps go off script a little bit and talk longer format than we usually do, but we'll see how it goes.
It might only be 10 minutes.
Let's
see.
It could be that we're done. No, but hopefully we can spark some interesting conversations. The three of us have been in this landscape for a while, but we all bring completely different perspectives, and we work in different areas of Norkon as well, which I think will also bring different perspective. But before we go into that, like I said, we've had Eirik on before, so needs no further introduction. That's a prompt for all of you to listen to all previous episodes. But Fredrik, you've never been on the podcast before.
My first time.
Yes, so welcome. Like I said, you bring a different perspective to this. You're far more on the technical side than Eirik and I are. You've been with Norkon since the start. Fredrik, why don't you give an introduction to yourself and how Norkon came about in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, coming from a technical background, founded Norkon back in 2014, which actually sprung out of a research project where we were building a platform to aggregate and analyze financial data to identify what's interesting, what's moving in the market. Worked really well with my co-founders who had more of a financial type of background. I did the technical aspect. And then we sort of pivoted into the media industry, taking that platform, that technology, to bring that power essentially into the end user's hands. That's what sparked Pulse, our first product. And then we built on that going forward with Live Center and Fancy Funds, all of which analyze and distribute a lot of data in real time.
And like I said, Norkon has been a product company from the start, and wasn't really all that into commercializing things perhaps immediately, but building solid foundations. Why was that? Why was that important for you?
Yeah, so the first product that we built, like the actual engine of things, we built that for ourselves. And when building products for ourselves to use, the user was in focus, right? Because the user was us. And then going from that, taking that same experience and building a product for a reader, essentially, of a financial newspaper, we were in that target audience as well. So we used that in order to build the best possible experience with the required tools, the UX and whatnot. It was a long process, but we got it. We're pretty happy with where it ended up. We sort of kept that same essence going into Live Center, collaborating with journalists who were going to use the tool. So always having the end user of the product in focus.
Which is, to me, the foundation of good product development. Even though I come from the commercial side of things, I have been on the product side of things as well. And all too often, I don't see that user-centric approach. So I'm happy to work at a company that actually does that.
Yeah, I'm glad.
So that's good news. Now, if we're going to look at 2024 first, as sort of a year in review, or 2024 wrapped, as Spotify calls it. Maybe start with you, Eirik. What's 2024 been like for you? What are your reflections now that we are at the edge of the year?
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot more about AI. It's everywhere. And then is it because the event organizers need to have AI on the agenda to attract audiences? Or is it that the publishers and the newsrooms actually are that interested in AI? I'm not that sure. I think, like, I see that in the boardrooms, there's a lot of talk about it, and they need to do things. But I think a lot of people or lots of decision makers are bit in the dark in like what to focus on and like how actually to utilize. It's like amazing technology coming up and improve the workflows, improve the reader experiences, and actually be able to win back the audience. Because as everyone knows and all the listeners know real well, it's like ever since the internet came in the late 90s, the media industry has been struggling to adapt to the changes, both in user patterns and all the challenges coming up from big tech and so on. So, but I think like it is a good sign that AI is on the agenda everywhere. Everyone talks about it because it tells us that we are now working in an industry that actually takes technology to heart and look at like how they better can utilize it. But I think like maybe one of the biggest surprises to me was on a few of the events we had like some big publishers being on stage talking about how they have realized they are not a technology company, that they actually need to buy winning software going forward to actually be in front of the technology revolution we are in the middle of. And I think that's like, for me, it's like AI was not a surprise that it was on the agenda, but how many major media houses actually are approaching it and are realizing that now we need to collaborate with vendors to be successful. That was a big surprise to me, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I was also surprised. Yet to be fully surprised, though, if coming from the sales side of things, when we talk to publishers, some have come further on that journey than others. I think there are still. Looking back at the conversations we've had this year, we've won a lot of deals, but we also lost some deals. And the deals we've lost have not been to competitors, usually. It's been to either some sort of decision-making inertia, or that companies are still, trusting their technology team or teams to develop better solutions, or maybe they look at it as cost efficient, whatever the use case may be. But to your point, I agree that it seems to be quite a big shift in the industry, and even with big players like Schibsted and Bonnier, who have gone out publicly and said that they will be buying more technology than they've ever done before. So that's good news. Now, for me, 2024 has been a year of consolidation, I think. Looking at a lot of the companies we've spoken with, and also companies we've seen on stage and read about in different news outlets like Press Gazette or Digiday or whatever it may be, that it's been a year of consolidation. Looking around, I think NRK is a great example of that, right? They're out with an RFP now on a CMS. Now they've probably spent a lot of time looking at what they need to do as a public broadcaster, and now going into 2025, now they're sort of looking at, okay, how can we make some real changes? And I think that's perhaps what I see is like, okay, 2023, 24 planning phase. What's the next stages of the media space, and how do we set ourselves up for success?
I think the NRK case is really interesting. I think, of course, we're Norwegian, so they are very close to us, but they're making some major cuts in the workforce now. Mm-hmm. But the reason for it is because they want to make more investments in technology going forward. They understand that for them to be competitive, they need to have improved technology. And then they need to make some tough decisions on the road. I think that's, of course, it's always sad when big or when any company need to make cuts in the workforce. But I think like the reason for this is like very interesting. I think it's for first time in a long time, I'm quite impressed with NRK and some of the decisions they make.
Yeah, and I totally agree. From your perspective, Fredrik, I mean, you work on sort of more of the existing customers and more on the innovation side of things. We've already talked about AI, but I don't think we're going to get around that.
Yeah.
And I know that you've been working on AI this year. But what are your reflections on this year?
Yeah, so 2024 has been a really interesting year when it comes to AI and actually adopting the technology and getting value from it. So yeah, I'm leading the innovation efforts at Norkon. Probably should have mentioned that in the intro, but here you go. Yeah, so this year has been when working on those efforts, especially for Norkon's efforts into AI, how we can adopt it in the best possible way. We already have a lot of interesting technology that pairs really well. Because in order to use AI efficiently, you have to have a lot of data, and we happen to have a lot of data. So our focus this year has been to look into all of the innovations that's happened in the space, and there's been a lot of progress from all of the actors essentially, but OpenAI, Gemini, etc. The main thing, if I can pick one, is the sort of the shift, I'd say, in the large LLMs, how easy it now has become to work with data that's more structured. So previously, you can add a spell checker or a proofread or whatever. You send some text in and you get some text back. But now, where the value really becomes apparent is you asking a question, sending in data, and you get structured data back. So you can sort of consider how technically you typically have a front end and a back end. So if you write something and you want to publish something, you send a request to the back end, and you get some context back in a structured format, like JSON typically. And now we sort of approach working with these types of models with JSON instead of just text. And that brings a lot of new opportunity to the table. So instead of just having text back, you can write this instead of that, we can structure it up in a much more user-friendly way and provide new types of insights that previously has been more challenging.
I just hope that someone comes up with an AI that is called Jason, so that the circle is complete. Then Jason serves Jason.
Jason serves Jason.
Yes, that's my little joke.
That's a shortcut to Skynet.
This sounds like a good joke at a development.
Yes. Have you met Jason? I don't know. Who's Jason? Everyone talks about Jason, but I've never seen him. Now, when we talk about AI now, and I think you and I might have some perspectives on this, and I'm curious to hear Fredrik as well. I keep hearing that you can't do personalization without AI. I keep hearing that. But yet, here we were 10, 12 years ago talking about personalization. And there were media companies who were doing personalizations. We were seeing content recommendations, companies like C-Sense, Frumal, and others who popped up and did content recommendations really well and personalized the front page and the experience, generally speaking. However, no one at that time was talking about AI. There wasn't even a conversation. It might have been one sentence of ML that we heard about from time to time, but still, it wasn't really that big. Now, that's all the jazz, right? And I'm curious and I don't know if this is a question to you or not, feel free to pick it up, but I'm curious to understand why the hell we did not have this surge in personalization 10 years ago, because the technology was there. And it's taken 10 years to even get to a conversation where you hear about personalization at conferences, in direct conversations with people, even though Winnipeg Free Press fully personalized the whole homepage in 2016. Don't arrest me if I'm wrong here, Christian Pansen at Winnipeg Free Press, but somewhere around that time, Winnipeg Free Press went all in on personalization. They were the first. And since then, I haven't really seen a lot. And then now, all of a sudden, it's everywhere. So that's, Eirik, you have perhaps a perspective on that? I don't know.
I have lots of thoughts on it. First of all, if people say that it's impossible to do personalization without AI, then it's just look at Google, look at the big social media players. They've been working with personalization for so many years, and even in the newspapers have been working with it, but it's been more on the ad side. And they worked on it maybe more indirectly through Google and other players. But like all of us, we have experienced personalization on newspapers for 10, 15 years already. So no, you don't need AI for it. But what we worked on in Seasons 10 years ago when we tried to pitch this was that we tried to combine all the different data that they had, everything from first-party data through CSMs and ERPs and everything. And also the context and our content on like what to read and all of those things, and try to combine it into segments and to deliver personalized experiences on websites. But I think like I don't know exactly why it hasn't happened that much in the degree that I expected 12 years ago. But I think I don't know exactly why. But I think like the biggest what we talked a lot about was like where it often stopped. The conversation stopped was with the editors. They came to the board and said like, I've been working as editor for 15, 20, 50 years. Like, I know this better than the readers sometimes, what they need. So they want to own the whole front page. It's very hard to be a vendor and go into those kind of discussions when you have an editorial team that's not willing to change.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's like the case in every newspaper and has been the case in every media house, but that's often where our conversation stopped because they had editors that wanted to be in charge of the whole front page.
But that's sort of the same, right? As having your edition, your printed edition, you have full control over everything. You keep that mindset. You go digital. We're digital now, so everything is great. But you keep the same type of patterns, right? So not necessarily that personalization is the answer here, but there's so many opportunities that you can embrace going digital. And going to social media, you see a whole different ball game, right? The user experience is completely different than like having your paper online, essentially, or newspaper paper.
Yes. I think if we sort of pivot the conversation a little bit then into what's going to come, right? We've talked about personalization, we talked about consolidation and the rise of AI. There's no doubt that in order to stay competitive, and I think I'm going to play off of what you just said, social media and other players, let's say, have eaten the media company's lunch, and to some degree or to a big degree, that's probably the media or the publishers' fault themselves, right? They've had their Kodak moment, so to speak. It's not cool to have physical film in the camera, and that went out a long time ago, and digital cameras and our cell phones took over. And it feels like the media landscape has had a similar experience, right? Where they missed the opportunity to innovate at a large scale, and then other players came in and took that space. And we're talking to publishers now who are looking at how to make themselves an interesting destination for users. Podcasts popping up everywhere. Journalists are coming a bit more like influencers than journalists, which is probably a good way to go because it mimics the reader patterns. But if we're going to sort of hold a glass bowl or a crystal ball, whatever you say, in front of us and sort of, okay, what's 2025 going to be like? I'm not one for making too hard predictions, but I think we can sort of probably read a little bit in the sand on what's coming. I have my thoughts, but I want to hear yours first.
You can start with your thoughts.
Oh, I knew it.
But I'm great at talking about like what's in the future, and I talk about 24 months, 36 months down the road. But like just a year from now, it's like then I will fail in all my predictions in a month from now.
Yeah, probably. I think it's going to be. I think there's going to be a shift. I don't know if I'm going to say 12 months or 24 months.
You said 12.
Yeah, I know. And this is a great way where I get to correct the question, right? No, if we look at 12 to 24 months from now, I think there's going to be a big need for media publishers to find vendors who are more like partners than actual vendors, who work with them on a strategic level. And I think also it's going to be necessary to find technology companies that can offer the same service at a lower cost. because cost saving is going to keep happening. There's no way around that fact. And in order for us in the technology space, we have to come up with solutions that are more cost efficient than in the past. I think I'm not saying that the era of platforms is over, but I think there's definitely going to be technology companies out there who are going to have their lunch eaten by companies who are now popping up, or maybe popped up 2 to 3 years ago, and are now hitting critical mass and can really hit the speed pedal. Do you say that in English?
Gas pedal.
Gas pedal. There we go. Thank you. And steal customers from the bigger platforms. I'm not going to mention names, but I think just in the paywall space, I've seen some things happening lately that I think is going to shake the world quite a bit. In the CMS space as well, I think changes are happening, and in other areas as well, such as ad tech and other pieces of the technology stack that publishers need to function well and innovate for the future. But it's easier now, and this is probably segueing into your sphere of things, Fredrik, where it's easier now to come up with products that are more cost efficient than in the past, maybe. Because the sort of shared innovation across the world is giving such a scale that it's perhaps easier. Now, I'm on thin ice here, but if I'm going to look at patterns that I identify, I think that's going to happen in the next 12 to 24 months.
Oh, well, yeah, I think you're totally onto something. And, well, technically, there's... it's much easier, I'd say, to be a one-man band now than what it has been historically. Using, not only building AI-powered tooling, but also using it to actually build something that yields value. And having these like super specific niches and getting traction with those that yield value immediately. I think we're going to see a lot of those types of companies pop up. And yeah, might start with one, but once they get traction, likely they'll get funded and we'll see shifts. So I think we're going to have a lot of like David Goliath type of situations going forward. But coming from that type of segment or from the established actors, I think we'll see a lot more relevant and viable applications of AI, not just like this cool little thing adds some, we're AI powered now, right? But that actually uses the data in order to transform the workflows. I think we're scratching the surface there. And given all of the advancements of this year, I doubt we'll have a similar type of year when it comes to the models themselves. But yeah, who am I to tell? But it seems like it's come to not a halt, but not as exponential as it has been. But now for everyone, to actually apply their that technology to their product, I think we're seeing the start of that.
Yeah, I think you both touched on some of the elements I want to talk about as well. I think the first thing you said was technology, and more best-in-breed software as well. I think we will see more and more of that. That instead of like larger platforms, because the patterns you've seen in the media houses previously has been more like if they had their own in-house development teams. It's not that they've been focusing on building these large platforms. They've been more focused on like very critical elements of the workflow and enhancing that and how to improve those workflows internally. And now you can see the same buyers going externally. What they will focus on this is like very like related to the larger patterns in like globally in all software industries as well. It's like they're focusing more.
I agree with you on a large scale, but what I also think that there are some regional differences that we haven't gotten into, right? If you look at Scandinavia or the Nordics, right? Publishers here are playing the game on easy mode, right? They have all the money in the world. They have affluent users who don't really watch, maybe up until recently, because now the macroeconomics is going a bit to shit in Norway and and Scandinavia in general compared to many other countries. But largely speaking, if you're Schibsted or if you're Amedia or if you're Alma Media or if you're Bonnier or if you're one of these big ones, you're playing the game on easy mode because subscriptions are coming in the door almost regardless, and they have multiple subscriptions to multiple media, and they're paying for Viaplay and Disney and all these other things that cost a lot more. So 59 or 99 kroners a month for VG seems like it's just not an expense. But if you go to Eastern Europe or you go to Latin America or you go to many parts of APAC or Asia Pacific and across Germany and across the US, then selling subscriptions is not that easy. So you don't have all that money. And there are exceptions to that. Again, Axel Springer is different, and yes. But if you're a mid to small size publisher in Latin America, I mean, the game is just different, right? And you have to build, because then also the people that you hire are super cheap to hire. What are you paying a developer in Argentina or Chile or compared to Norway or Germany, right?
There's definitely an advantage in terms of cost, but how attractive are you as a publisher wanting to hire the best talent,
Sure.
like especially when it comes to like new technology, like AI? Like, why would great developer opt into joining a small force working on that there, rather to a larger team working on a platform for multiple media groups, right? I think there's pros and cons. Like in a easy mode scenario, it's not really that easy to attract the right talent. But in the hard mode, where it's harder to sell subscriptions, maybe it's easier to attract that type of talent.
Yeah, I agree. And just because I think that will be one of the advantages or one of the success factors for successful media houses going forward is like their ability to utilize all the developers out there, all the different software companies. So instead of having like 20 in-house developers, you actually have the opportunity today to utilize 20,000 developers in many different companies. And if you manage to actually navigate in that landscape and acquire the best-in-breed software, you will sit there with like some kick-ass technology going forward. Another thing I think, Birger, like you touched on the next element I want to talk about as well with data. I think that's very related to subscriptions as well. You're talking about like 99 kroner is not that much in Norway, but the challenge is that it's not that much for the media houses either. Like we're talking about the two main revenue streams they've had. It's historically it's ads and people buying newspapers. And historically, like one newspaper, let's say it costs like €2, and you buy that for 20 days in a month. Then we're talking about €60 in average for a reader in revenue. And now that is like 99 kroner. What's that like? Like that's €10, less than €10. So how will they be successful in making like diverse models to make sure that people are willing to pay more if they're able to? I think that's also where data comes in. It's like we're talking about data to provide like personalized content and so on. But how can you also be able to utilize that data to make sure that your readers are willing to pay more for both your content and the products you are delivering? And that's like, if you manage to solve that, then you're able to actually really change one of the most important revenue streams they have. And I think like many media houses and publishers are underestimating the gold they actually sit on with data, the first-party data. Like the first-party data is the goal they have. They're able to actually deliver personalized content similar to social media players. They're able to
Should be able to
as well.
Difference,
I think this is like I was at a dinner last weekend. It was really interesting. So next to me, I was sitting like one person working in like more on the content, like the content marketing side of a big media house, and his partner, she was a journalist. She was very, very worried about personalization. She was very worried, she said, she doesn't approve it because she's worried that we will take the readers down a rabbit hole where they end up with like reading like the same, like creating these echo chambers of media houses or newspapers, which being a journalist is like exactly what you don't want.
Yeah, I think the fear is real when it comes to social media, and you can see what it's doing or the implication that it has in platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and whatnot. That echo chambers, and you get all of that reinforced, and it has some interesting consequences. But that's like the very extreme end of the spectrum, whereas you have like zero personalization on one end and then maybe too much on the other end. But just striking that right balance for the media houses, I think there's a lot of potential value there. But the fear is real, and that she's not the first one.
Yeah, but I mean, you could ideologicalize yourself out of business if you think too hard that way, right? I think yes. Let's not over-personalize. But I think I'd rather err on that side and do too much personalization and make sure that I create habits for the users, and then perhaps I get the chance to inject other content. But if they don't come to me at all, then I've lost the battle in the first place.
Yeah. But it's also the fact that there's... like if you're on a huge platform, like there's tons of content creators on all of these social media platforms, but coming from a publisher, like what's the chances of you being radicalized based off of the content that they produce anyway? So it's sort of like the balance is important.
Depends what media, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
But yes,
I think
largely speaking.
But like personalized content and so on, it's not only about politics and related. It's more about like the bigger segments, I believe. It's like, for example, if you are like you, for example, you support Liverpool. So why should you, when you go into a live feed from the transfer rumors, why should you get lots of news about Italian football teams or championship teams or Norwegian football teams, for that matter, if you're only interested in like the top 5 teams in the UK? So it's more about like creating, or for me myself, like at least I believe I'm not that into Kardashians or like entertainment news,
or so you say.
That's what I say. So I hope I am, but that's like the publisher should know, because they see it on the data. But yeah, you see my screen on TV.
I'm deleting your browser history.
Yeah, but then, like if I'm like if I only care about sports and politics in general, why should I get all these entertainment news as well? Because that is like the kind of like noise that makes me move over to alternative news sources, because they know exactly what I'm interested in. So I think it's not a rabbit. Understand the worry about the rabbit hole, but it's more than that.
And not only the fact that, so in Birger's case, getting news about Liverpool or the top 5, right? But not only that, but getting the content about who Liverpool will be playing against the next upcoming weeks, months, right? So that you know that, oh, there's been an injury in team X that I don't really care about. But if you're told that, oh, you're interested in Liverpool, they're playing against these, this is relevant from them. Like, that's a whole new world that's opening up, not just like filtering out the content.
Yeah, and I think most people are open to sharing that kind of data. It's a matter of how you leverage it, right? I have a Google Pixel phone, and I don't know exactly how this happened, but Google knew rather quickly that I'm a Liverpool fan. And I get notifications on my phone. I get, to your point, about upcoming matches and news, and a little bit about Chelsea and a little bit about other teams, right? And it's that makes my life easier. And I think most people want that, right? And going back to let's just say 2015. Could be 17, could be 14, I don't care. But let's say 2015. Personalization on e-commerce was common, right? You have, and I think Amazon was probably the first to really do that well, where you've looked at item X. Here's what other people who bought this item also looked at. And I think that's the level of personalization that e-commerce brought into the world. And few media companies have been able to replicate, even 10, 12 years later. And it should be relatively easy, or it is relatively easy from a technical standpoint, because the technology is there. It's alive. There are companies like Frumel and Kilkaya who do this, like, out of the box. It comes out of the box. Piano can do it too, right? So the technology is right there. Our media built it in-house, spent gazillions on it, and it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay, right? but being able to bring value to your readers, because if I'm a subscriber and I'm over time not experiencing that I get value from my subscription, then you can be damn sure I'm going to churn, right?
Yeah.
And that goes for my any kind of I probably have 4 news subscriptions, I think about 4. And one of them is kind of just there because I want to have it, but I don't really use it all that much. The 3 other ones I use quite a lot. But I can be sure that the second I don't feel like I'm using it anymore, I will definitely, churn or cancel my subscription.
You'll be a part of their churn metrics.
Yes, I will be a part of their churn metrics for sure.
But like going forward, like going back to the thinking ahead, especially when it comes to personalization, if you bring AI into the mix, of course, like there's already recommendation algorithms to recommend, like, read these articles or this product, like stuff like that, right? That's been around for a long time, maybe not used the way in which it should be, but yeah. But with AI, we have the possibility not only to suggest like specific articles, but to be more aware of the context, like not just this article, but what did this article talk about, and be able to summarize, give you a personalized context about what's next for you to read, not only to point to different articles, but about everything that has been published. Like not just the end result isn't the article, it's parts within the article, it's context that has been published, right? I think there's new possibilities there that hasn't really been possible before. I don't really know how that would look like, but I think we're entering a new era of personalization going forward.
I think so too, and I think the recent trend I've seen as well is publishers diving more into user needs or reader needs. What problem can I solve for our readers today? What's my role as a publisher to solve reader problems or reader needs? And once you get into that, and publishers, I think, will dive into that in 2025, you mix that with personalization, then you have and data, then you have a pretty solid foundation. I think.
You need data.
Yeah, I think I also hear that lots of players, both on the vendor side and also publishers, are talking a lot about like how can we personalize the content so it's more in the format that specific reader appreciates. For example, is more pictures? Do they have more videos? Do we know that this reader actually like to consume text in these kinds of articles and so on? But like, for me, maybe I'm a little defensive here, but I think that's interesting. But I don't think that's where the first battle will be. I think like first we need to find out like how can we deliver the right content to the right reader, and then we can talk more about the format of the content. But that's like, for me, it's more in the future. I don't think it's probably lots of good software that can work on this, but I think that will not make the difference now. We need to sort of the bigger challenges first, and then we'll have to sort that in the next wave in a way. So, but another thing is like I'll be taking over for you, Birgit. Good. But this is I think we touched. I think some of the things you've been talking a lot about recently, which I think is really interesting, is like what new players will pop up going forward. And earlier you talked about consolidations, but I'm thinking you have talked a lot about news influencers. And maybe I believe like traditional media will survive. I think it will be great. They definitely have a position in the future. If not, I wouldn't be working here. I love media. But I think it's like we will probably see consolidations, but I think we also will see new players that like historically maybe have been more in the social media / new media space, but now will go into more traditional media. But they will use, like, we will see some new, I don't know, but some new formats and so on. Birgit, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I was lucky enough to be part of a panel debate on this at the TWIPE event earlier this year. And this is a very large topic because it can go in so many directions. So I'll try with my ADHD brain to structure it as best as I can and then try to follow me.
Off the bat.
Yeah.
No preparations.
No preparations. No, I think if you're an influencer today and you don't have that editorial guideline to go by, then you're pretty free to do whatever you want, right? And you can publish on Instagram, you can publish on TikTok, you can publish on YouTube, whatever. And there's no doubt that the rise of non-editorial controlled influencers is here to stay, right? That's not going to go away. And a lot of that comes back to traditional media not earning or failing to earn the trust among certain cohorts of users. And those cohorts of users are growing. Donald Trump is a great example of that. Fake news. That spread like wildfire. And you look at big podcasts around the world, Joe Rogan in the US, we have Wolfgang V in Norway, we have several others.
This show.
Yeah, there's no editorial control here. Sorry, Alex. And I spoke to a friend of mine who was adamant about the fact that he stopped reading all traditional news, international and national, and only follow influencers and YouTubers and so on now. And has never been able to make better decisions on certain parts of his life, like investing and healthcare and other things, because he now has a completely different set of people that he trusts, and it works well for him, he says. Okay, cool. But the spread of misinformation is no joke, and I think that's a really important topic that is also a big topic, so I won't go into detail, but I think that's it comes back to media houses needing to earn the trust of their users. And I think Sky News is doing great things on that, where they have under each headline or somewhere on the article page, they have like, why trust Sky News? And you have this, I forget the name of it, you have this collaboration across global news publishers. I think the Boston Globe is part of it, BBC, South China Morning Post, which I think it's called the Media Trust or something, where I forget exactly what it's called, but you have these collaborations to make media trustworthy again, because there's no doubt that media has earned their way out of people's trust as well. So how do you earn it back? And then I think going back to sort of the core of your question as well, I think hiring right is going to be important, because you take Piers Morgan, for example. He spun out of TV and started YouTube instead because he couldn't speak the way he wanted to speak, and perhaps the editorial boards of media corporations need to loosen up a little bit. And NRK in Norway tried that with Sophie Elise getting her own podcast. Not the best idea in the world, so perhaps not give it to her, but maybe someone who's a bit more normal, but still can have some freedom within the editorial guidelines, let's say, and push the boundaries a little bit for what's okay to say. Because there's no doubt that, when you have CNN during COVID reporting on people and the way they did media coverage during COVID was awful. And they definitely earned their way out of people's trust. And you see the same thing in Norway at certain times. So I think it's going to be important for editorially driven news outlets to hire well and be able to earn the trust back, so that people can actually come back and listen and read news that they find interesting from sources and people who are interesting to them. I think that's the key, because if you have Kristen Sveaas, which is, he's great, but I don't relate to him at all. I couldn't care less.
I don't think all the listeners relate to him either.
Kristen Sveaas is a billionaire in Norway, right? And he's very old-fashioned, very conservative. I couldn't care less what he says, right? But if you have someone younger who's an entrepreneur, or someone who's a bit more on that side of things that I relate more to, then I will read that, right? And I think that's true for a lot of people. You look at younger people today, they will read news where people they can relate to are either writing the article or are the source to the article. And I think that's where the influencer side of things can come back into traditional media. That was a very long-winded answer.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting dilemma, though, like loosening up and being trustworthy at the same time. But that's sort of the nut to crack.
Yes, I definitely think so. I mean, I know when I listen to Joe Rogan, I can't trust all of it. I know that going in. But it's really entertaining, and it's giving me an alternative view to some things that might, challenge me. And I think that's important. I think a lot of people experience that, where, you know, the traditional news is like all the same. You go to VG in Norway, DB in Norway, whatever, the 4 big ones, right? TV2, NRK. It's all the same news. It's all the same blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I can read VG and I'm set. I don't really need to read anything else.
Yeah, and you're quite an opportunistic person as well. So, like, to fill your backpack with some new ideas and angles probably helps you as well.
Yeah, but I think that's true for a lot of people, right? You need to be challenged. You need to that's going back to the personalization side of things. You know, you go too far and people won't be challenged and they'll fall into this information bubble. But if you keep it challenging, I think that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think also you mentioned like the battle against like misinformation and fake news. I think this goes a bit back to AI as well. I think that's where AI will play a major role going forward. Are we able, because there's never been so much information out there as it is now. I remember I worked for a Norwegian technology company like 10, 15 years ago when we talked about big data. Big data is the future. Yep. But like what we believed was big data back then, that's not big data today. Like now it's like massive data sets. So if you are a journalist or if you work with content in general, like you have to work with massive data sets. And how do you manage to like go through everything, analyze it, and then understand like what is correct, what is like misinformation here? It's like that is a big challenge. But you need to, I think that's where maybe many of the vendors and software companies going forward will actually be able to make a difference, because they can help journalists like do like a better job and deliver better content with more quality and faster than ever before, and so on. I know that you've been working a bit on that, Fredrik, as well.
Yeah, we've been looking into exactly that. Well, maybe that's why you asked the question, how we can empower journalists utilizing all of this data to provide the most relevant information to their fingertips, doing the research on their behalf, but at the same time having the journalists in control. So not fact-checking, just saying that this is okay, but rather having the tools and the AI actually figuring out what's the sources that's backing this up, always pointing externally, essentially having a buffet of information to the journalists or the content creators in general, so that they can go and verify it and they can get more context about what they're writing. And also an area where I think we're just scratching the surface, given the technological advancements in 2024. We're in a much better spot to continue developing this type of technology, and it's all sort of coming together, especially for companies that has this type of competency and the access to these data sets. So I think 2025 will be a very interesting year.
Yeah, I agree. I think looking at least the companies that I'm in touch with, there's no way journalists and editors and, well, I guess you can say sales as well. They're all going to have to rely on more and more technology to make better decisions, so that the company is able to make more money on the content that they serve their users.
And to stay competitive.
Yeah,
to be trusted.
And
to
more
have
content
reach.
doesn't equal more revenue, right? I think it was a recent study from Reuters, or I forget, someone's going to grill me on this, but it's pretty clear that more content doesn't mean more revenue, right? You produce more quality content, that means more revenue typically. And I think that's where journalists can really make a difference, and if they have the right tools, and that I'm looking forward to seeing more of that in 2025.
Yeah, I think this is where AI is super cool. Yeah. This is where it like becomes awesome. When you're actually able to utilize this technology, not to just create some small features here and there, but actually we can help the journalists to like make the content that people actually are expecting going forward as well, and utilizing all the data out there. I think so many great opportunities lying with the big tech companies and the what they can provide us with, and so on as well.
So now you know what you need to build.
Yeah, I'll take some notes.
Perfect. All right. So we've recorded a much longer podcast than we normally do, which is great. and Eirik took over the interviewing role, which is fantastic. Took a bit of a weight off my shoulders, so thank you. But we have to stay true to the format, which we've already have your answer to this, Eirik, but feel free to answer the question as well. But Fredrik, how many cups of coffee do you drink per day? You may add Red Bull to that as well, because I know you're an avid Red Bull drinker.
I'll rough estimate 5, I'd say. Yep. Does that include like doubling up like coffee and espresso in the same cup? Is that
that's
2
called
or
a
1?
Thor's hammer.
Yeah.
When you do
Really?
Yeah,
You
it's
need
called.
to have
That's
that.
great.
Yeah,
That's my like morning special.
Yeah,
Thor's hammer. I love it.
It's my hangover cure. It's a Thor's hammer. You can buy it at the Kaffebrenneriet.
Oh, I had no idea.
It's really good.
I thought that was like my discovery, but yeah.
No, double espresso in a cup of coffee. It's perfect. All
Double
right.
espresso as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. If that doesn't wake you up, you're screwed. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. And rounding off 2024, I think we should also give some kudos to Alex, our, what should we call it, sound engineer. Thank you, Alex, for some great podcast collaboration. And then we will see you all next year. And looking forward to many more interesting conversations. Thank you.
Thanks.
bye.
Bye-bye.